So you said you're very passionate about learning, which is handy, right? Because this is the Learning at Large podcast. But why are you so passionate, and what is it that perhaps makes learning matter now more than ever as we look at the kind of future upon us?
Well, I think if we look at the future, we don't know where it's going to take us. I think that's the biggest thing that most of us are feeling at the moment. We don't know where it's going to take us, but wherever it takes us, we're going to have to adapt to change. We're going to have to adapt to new ways of working. We're going to have to adapt to, with maybe adapting to working with robots or with, more technology. The world is just changing. We don't know where it's going. So learning is our way of surviving. That's how humans have survived, and other animals too, of course, have survived, but all the time that life has existed. So it's about survival, and I think that's why we need to make sure that learning can be as impactful as it can be, to be as optimized as it can be for people, so that they learn with purpose, and they learn with some level of awareness of how they're learning and why they're learning and what they're learning. That doesn't mean you can't learn unconsciously or without awareness, but if you become more aware about how you're doing it, you can begin to optimize it. So I think right now we just really need to support people to find their way in this vastly changing world.
And we're going to dive into that a little bit more in a moment, and your kind of thoughts around that. But I always like to kind of kick off the podcast with, if I can, like putting you on the spot with some of those kind of quick capture questions. So one of the ones I wanted to ask you from a kind of neuroscience point of view, I guess, is what's one of the biggest myths that people tend to hold about learning that you just wish would disappear, because it's just not helping people?
I think the biggest myth is that, it can happen fast. And it can. So if we are learning to avoid danger, we can learn very quickly to avoid danger. But that's not, hopefully, what you're doing most of the time of what you're doing at work. You're learning cognitive skills. You're learning physical, things you need to be able to do. You're learning practical things. And those are things that you want to be able to do. So our brains are just designed to take time to learn. We cannot learn things immediately. And I think that's the biggest myth out there, that, so many and I think this has been exacerbated by tech, but probably L&D have their place to play as well. We say we can make learning easy for people, and actually learning isn't easy. Learning is effortful. There's desirable difficulty involved in learning. We have to put the work in to learn. And I think the biggest myth is that it's super easy and it can happen really quickly.
I mean, if you did have the superpower to inject into the brains of L&D leaders some kind of skill that would help them boost the impact of their learning, like what would you kind of plonk in there? If you could do it overnight, what would you give them?
If it was an actual, it would be the skill of being a lazy trainer, a lazy L&D person. Because I think so often we end up kind of trying to do the work for people. And we spend a lot of time creating, resources and content and events for people. But actually, it's not us that should be doing that work. It's the learners who need to do that work of learning, because it's learners' own brains that need to shift and to change. So I think, if I could give people a skill, it would be that skill. It would be the skill to create an environment in which learning can happen, and then step back from it.
Yeah, environment rather than stuff, right?
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Yes. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thanks. So let's dive a little bit deeper then. We've both, I think, just come back from Learning Technologies in London, which was a fantastic event. But I think, I don't know how you're feeling, but for me, you come away with the feeling of the big crossroads or cross section or intersection between people meeting AI, meeting tech, and it's now starting to happen very, very rapidly. And it's only going to go one direction, right? So AI is going to get more and more involved. So I wanted to kind of pick your brains as a neuroscientist, and also with your own background in learning, as to what you're seeing perhaps as the threats and opportunities in that picture. If that's not too difficult to try and ask now, a few days on from the conference.
So probably I should point out that I'm not a neuroscientist. I'm a psychologist by training, but I have, even in doing psychology, I did study a lot the science of the brain. So, but I see a neuroscientist, somebody who's really out there doing deep research and possibly even implanting electrodes or chopping brains up. But the question is, what are the threats and the kind of exciting bits? And I think what's, to me, so clear right now is, learning is basically, do I avoid this threat or do I approach this thing that looks like it's going to be helpful to me? And I think that's exactly where we are right now. One of the sessions at the conference was Professor Joseph Devlin, and he was talking about what's happening with our brain based on what's happening with AI. And there are lots of people currently saying, are we making ourselves more stupid? Because if we allow AI to do everything for us, the way our brains are very energy hungry. And they're sort of, I don't want to say they're lazy, but they're kind of lazy. They don't want to use the energy that is required. So if they can find a quicker, cheaper, easier way around it, that's what they'll do. So if AI enables us to find all the information we want, make decisions, our brains will stop doing that for us. And I think that's the biggest threat, that we will begin to hand responsibility to AI. And, AI is clearly happily accepting it at the moment. That's its apparent, it's not, but that's how it feels like it's accepting that responsibility. And it's even offering, you put a thing into ChatGPT or some of the LLM at the moment, and you ask it a question, then it comes back with a kind of, can I help you further with this? It's really got that kind of feeling of, I'm here to help, I'm here to make something better for you.
Yeah,
But
plus the flattery as well that it adds in, like, great question. Yeah.
Yeah, yes, absolutely, yes, and we're triggered by that. And that's good because it's learning from us to a degree. But I think the biggest fear I have is that, we will stop using our brains. It's use it or lose it. And if we stop using our memories to the same degree, if we start to hand responsibility for decision making over to AI, if we start to get it to cognitively, do our work for us, that will make our brains do other things. And maybe that will, we don't know at the moment. We don't know if that's going to be better or worse. But my biggest concern is that at the moment, we still have that ability to kind of check what comes out of it means mostly out of LLMs. That's what we're mostly talking about in terms of training. We can still currently check it and see if it's making mistakes. But if we start to lose the knowledge that underpins that ability to check, new people coming into the business, if they just don't learn that, knowledge that you and I have acquired over many years, Kirsty, how are they going to check? How are they going to check that it's valid? How are they going to check that, sources are reliable? How is that going to happen? And that's my biggest concern, I think. At the same time, it offers lots of opportunities, but that's my biggest concern.
What might be some of those opportunities that you're seeing? Give us some hope. Have you got any thoughts on that?
So I think the democratization of, availability of information and the availability of opportunities to learn from and with AI, that is amazing. Anybody, if they've got access to a computer, can, begin to get access to all the knowledge that we've ever captured through the world. That democratization is amazing. I think that's fantastic. And that goes, I mean, again, that's interesting, isn't it? Because somebody was talking the other day, it might have been Josie, it might have been somebody else, was saying that, at one time books were considered dangerous. If we have books, then people will not remember all the things they know. And clearly we now see books as very valuable. So democratization, I think, is really valuable. The ability to kind of find out what you want, just anything, and to dive deeper and to go sideways, and that you don't have to, and you can do it so much quicker. You can solve that itch to have a piece of information. You can solve that so much quicker. So I think all those things are really good. But I think as humans, we are kind of conditioned to always be looking at the pros and cons. Where, I'm going to walk towards this, but that might be dangerous. That's the way our brains work. It's that kind of balance of and curiosity. And I think we're really, really on that knife edge at the moment. I think some people are feeling the fear and maybe putting their heads in the sand or saying everything, everything is doom and gloom. Others are far more curious, and maybe they're sort of doing the opposite and saying, well, I'm not going to look at the doom stuff. And I hope that, for most of us, we're just trying to weigh it out.
Yeah. I think I'm naturally flip-flopping between both of the extremes on the scale. But it's interesting you mentioned the democratization of learning. So I think that for me is also one of the big benefits. And you also talked earlier on about setting up an environment or creating an environment where people can learn. So now there's lots more tools or ways in which people can do that. But I guess you also touched on this idea that who can check the answers, right? And the more that we outsource questions and answers and knowledge, then that kind of checks and balances may not be there in the same way that we've known them, perhaps. So, do you think there's the ownership of learning? If we think about learning in a workplace, for example, I mean, ownership could be debated anyway, right? Who owns it? Who should own it? And is it always a combination? But are you seeing kind of shifts in that? And also, where does the L&D team sit in that model? Like, if where do they fit?
So I think it would be really good if learners started to accept, to feel more responsible for learning. I think there's still a tendency for people to think, well, I'll just wait until I'm spoon-fed something. And that's not everybody, clearly. But, if you're busy in a job and you're just trying to get your job done, you may not see the current advantage in learning, I don't know, a new skill that, you can't currently see. And I know organizations are looking at, well, how can we help people see the value of new skills? How we can, but those new skills and the value of them is set at a time. In the future. It's not right now. Whereas what people want to learn right now is, how do I do this thing right now? And I think that's where, just in time learning and asking, if it's Google or AI or anybody, that's where that's really valuable, because that can help you solve the problem right now. Whether that means you've learned it or whether you just have learned where to find the information, I think that's a question we should ask. And maybe that's all we need to learn. Maybe we just need to learn where to find it, where is a good source, and how to ask the right questions. I think what you just said there, Kirsty, is important, but I think it's still going to be a shared responsibility. It's certainly an organizational learning, because you can't be spending time at work learning something that isn't relevant for the organization. I could learn to play badminton, but that's not going to help the organization I work for. So I think the organization still has to have some ownership, some agreed responsibility for, these are the things that you need to learn in order for us as a business to be able to flourish and thrive and grow, because if we don't, then you won't have a role anyway. So, and then I think as learners we should have that responsibility ourselves to say, well, I really want to do this, and I can see that this is going to support me in my career. I can also see it's going to support the business. And it might be something that, I'm enjoying learning. I'm growing myself. I'm growing my own skills, my own capabilities.
No, go on. Sorry, I interrupted you in your flow. Sorry, I didn't mean to.
Just the third piece was the organizational piece. Whether it's L&D or whether it's another something that we don't quite know about yet. Where are they going to have an impact? And I think where L&D does have value is, they can often bring those other parties together. And also L&D are passionate about learning. That is our job. So actually we are the people who have the time and energy and commitment to helping people put things together. So I think we still will have that oversight of what's going on. Maybe checking with people, is it, one of our big questions should be, is it really a learning need? Or is it something else in the business that needs to change? And I think that's perhaps where we should start to take more responsibility in L&D is less of the offering courses and more of the, well, let's see what a good solution to this particular problem is. And that's not new. People have been saying that for years.
Yeah, I think it'd be interesting to see, with the kind of skills gaps, and one of the benefits of some of the AI tools, they can maybe help you map out some of the future skills needs or skills gaps. I've also heard talk of kind of boiling skills down to tasks. So there could be a kind of risk, if you like, in that just like allow people to find what they need in the moment to help them with that task. Okay, and we can get very kind of tunnel visioned. Whereas we know that to learn deep skills, to do deep learning, to learn something like, we might not necessarily, I'm not saying this is a skill of the future, but to learn something like OD, you need to kind of really get involved and practice it and build that up. there could be a flip, I guess, for businesses to go much more to the self-serve, quick answers, off you go.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to see what the investment side is like. For those where they really want to invest in long-term skills, are
Right.
they making use of those space learning opportunities, the multi-platforms, so I think there's something to watch there, but we could do that right now, right? We could call out where there's too much of the quick content fixes and not enough long-term learning.
And I think content fixes, people are kind of happy with it. I think this is one of the things that it will be, if I had a magic wand and I could change everybody, I would give everybody the skill of actually understanding how learning really, really happens. What's the real because it's a process. It's not an instant thing. That, that quick fix of I'll watch a TikTok video or I'll watch a YouTube video or I'll, whatever it is, I'll just Google it. Oh, that's the AI question. That does give you a quick, immediate reward. And that is really helpful in that moment, but it doesn't necessarily, as you're saying, see the bigger picture. It doesn't help you do the deep learning that I think as humans, that is how we have evolved, is to do that deep learning, to do the stuff that really matters and to see the broader picture. Because you might have, imagine, I don't know why I always fix on listening skills, but it's one that people always say it's hard to do, but it sounds like it's an easy thing to do. Well, you could learn really good listening skills, but it would help you be a better communicator. But if you only learned really good listening skills and didn't learn, the powers of persuasion and perhaps how to, write a really good document, you wouldn't become a good communicator. So I really like the task focus thing. I think it's really interesting, but I don't think it's the full answer because you could learn different tasks, but somehow they've got to be put together.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a space to watch, though, isn't it? I think it's early days, and let's hope that the models build up and
Yeah.
apply more context and more holisticness.
It's the context, I think, in which you need, because you could learn to do a task in one particular context, but if you don't then transfer that into other contexts, it may not transfer. But if it doesn't transfer into other contexts, you're going to have to learn it again there. And if you don't make that connection, that deep learning of, oh, this thing is quite like that thing, which is part of deep learning, isn't it? It's the reflection piece. Then you're just constantly learning little things, but you're never going to put it all together and have that more grounded learning.
So I want to ask you another question, which is more about the kind of present picture, really, rather than, we're not going to ignore the future, don't get me wrong, we're not just going to put our head in the sand. But when we think about the current picture with the ways that L&D teams might be operating when it comes to skills learning or workplace learning, from your point of view, what's kind of working and what's maybe not working in that current picture that has, I guess, then it has the risk of being exacerbated. So what are some of the biggest mistakes that you see organizations make kind of currently around their learning models that you'd love to fix?
So I think the biggest one is this obsession with content. We are overwhelmed with content, and that can only get worse with AI. Don Taylor talks about, is it the tsunami or the beige wave of content? That is only going to get worse. And if the content isn't validated, even worse still, because at least L&D were checking the content or they were checking subject matter experts, if we're just allowing AI to do that. So I think that overuse of content and focus on knowledge rather than doing. And that's why the task approach, I think, is so interesting, because it's much more focused on the doing. So I think that the knowledge piece, there's the lack of focus on practice and the fact that they're not connecting. All the research for as long as I've been in L&D has always said we need to have managers connected to learning, because managers are the people or managers, supervisors, whoever they are, because they're the people who see you do the job at work. They see what changes you make. And they're very rarely, sometimes there's, a message goes to them that, Kirsty's done this course, but they're rarely really involved in helping find you opportunities to put that into practice. And if they only find the opportunity 3 months down the line, you've already forgotten what it was you learned.
It helps if the learning in the first place is genuinely business critical or critical for that team, right? So trying to get manager buy-in, as you said, they're busy people, when the learning's on the edges or it doesn't quite fit, then either fit that person's development pathway, which they do need to respect and support. It's not all about what the business needs that in that moment in time, or is ticking something that they really, really need, then of course you're going to get buy-in more, aren't you?
I think that's one of the other things that we do in L&D. We don't talk language in business enough. So we say things like, well, let's do, a team is challenged. Let's teach them about psychological safety, and then we offer them psychological safety training. Well, I bet no manager ever has said, I want my team to have psychological safety training. They've probably said things like, I want my team to function better together, to collaborate better, or to, collaborate with another team better. But we put up courses that say, join a psychological safety training, or join, a time management training, and you can't actually manage time. It's not possible. And I guess there's a kind of, an understanding of what underlies that. But I think a busy person would much rather see here is how to, something that is really relevant to them. So I think we should really think about even if you build in psychological safety training into that thing, just don't call it that. Call it something that's more practical and relevant to the people who are going to learn that skill or that ability to do something new.
Yeah, what's in it for me? Yeah, definitely. Yeah, if you thought like a marketeer, you would never call it that, I don't think.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm working at the company I'm working with at the moment. I've got it written on a post-it here. I talked to the head of learning last week, and he said that what I want you to keep focused on all the time is the WIFM for Random Joe. That's all I care about. WIFM for Random Joe. And I thought, yeah, that's a really good practical way of thinking about it all the time.
So that's what's in it for me, just in case anyone out there is going, what's a WIFM? Yeah, brilliant. So what would you recommend that L&D leaders and teams maybe do now to help foster, you mentioned the word environment earlier, foster better learning environments? Like, what could they be doing or putting in place beyond just manager support that would help them or help employees in the future?
So I think, the things like coaching and mentoring also really help. So what are the things people can do whilst they are in the workplace doing the job? What job tools, what job aids are available to people? And again, that can be very quickly done now with AI, as long as it's validated by somebody. I think all those are really important. But I really think what L&D should do is really get to grips with how does learning really work? Because I talk to a lot of people, and a lot of them don't know how learning really works. And I'm not saying everybody has to become a neuroscientist or to understand it at great depth, but to understand it at the level of people need, we use this gear model, people need, you have to focus on transfer, that people need by the end of whatever the learning journey is, not by the end of a session or by the end of a video, but by the end of this learning journey, they need to be able to do. That's the end goal. And then how do we help to engage people and motivate them as they go through that learning journey? Because a really good learning journey involves practice, repetition, things that aren't, the things that make us get high and a buzz. Those are the things that we fail at and we get, kind of sad about, or we feel disconcerted about. So that kind of engagement, how do we help people feel engaged throughout a learning journey and accept and appreciate that, sometimes it won't feel good, sometimes it'll feel hard. And then you've got that kind of guide part at the beginning, which is that is the content piece. And how well is that content piece done? Are we overwhelming people with content? Are we looking at how to reduce cognitive overload and actually helping people access the information they need in the best possible way for that individual and for their team? Then you've got the experiment part. When you're trying something new, when you're learning something new, you want an opportunity to just check it in with somebody else or to test it in a safe environment. And AI could be really good there. I don't know if you've played with role play with AI. It's brilliant. It's really, really, really good. And you can have a really kind of quite realistic conversation with it that helps you kind of practice a particular conversation or something. So you've got the experiment piece, and then you've got the apply piece. I need to do this in the workplace. I need that opportunity. I need that support to apply it. And then we need to think, well, not then all the way through, you need to be thinking about how do we make sure that people can retain this knowledge they may need to retain. So how do we make stuff memorable? And cognitive overload does not make things memorable. How do we make sure that, information is retainable, but also how do we make sure that people have opportunity to practice over and over again so that whatever they're learning becomes becomes a new set of neural connections. And that takes time.
And in that sort of democratization framework, we talked about early on, you were one of the bonuses, I guess, or the benefits you thought of the kind of increase in the use of AI and technologies to aid learning is it makes it more democratic. It puts it more in the hands of the individual employee or learner. How important is it then for those individuals to really learn how they learn best or how to learn best? Because we have seen it actually as a request, I think, as a skill gap or as a learning request, that people want to learn how to learn.
Yeah.
Do you think that needs to be honoured? Should there be courses on that? Or is it something you need to do through seeing best practice and experiencing best practice that's set up by someone else?
Well, there are courses on that.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's on Coursera. I think one of the most popular courses on there is Learn to Learn. And I think they've got millions of subscribers to that one. So I think people would like to learn to learn. The challenge with it is it's got to be quick and easy enough to be able to pick up some top tips, because it's not your key priority.
Yeah.
Your task is to get whatever your job done is. But if people can get some, and there are some relatively simple things, you can do is as soon as you've learned something, this is a really, really stupid, simple example, but after learning technologies on, what day was it? Wednesday, Thursday?
Yeah.
On Friday, and even on Thursday night, there were tons of LinkedIn posts, which is people reflecting on what they learned. Really, really good. But I was just too overwhelmed. So with my brain was still kind of processing. I just couldn't articulate what I wanted to say about it. So I had to wait till Monday to really think it through until, okay, now I can reflect on it. So I think it's recognizing that reflection is really important. And if you do it quickly, that's fine. But I suspect if you wait a little bit longer, you'll probably have a more in-depth reflection. You'll allow your brain to bring in more ideas from other places. Whereas if you just do that reactive reflection. So if we just taught people to reflect more, if we taught them that, being told something once is not enough, and you will have to, go over it again and again. I think one of the really big things is we taught people that recall will help you learn, but recognition won't help you learn. So that kind of idea of, I'm revising and I'm looking at my notes and I think to myself, oh, yeah, I know all that. But when you go into the exam, you think, no, I don't, because you didn't attempt to recall it, because recognition is a real false friend in terms of learning. It makes us think, oh, yes, I feel confident, I recognize it. But that's not enough to actually help you recall the information or do the task.
Yeah.
How many times have you watched a YouTube video and thought, yeah, I've got that. Then you've gone to do the thing. And then you thought, I'm going to watch that again.
I guess that's a kind of slightly strange thing with, standalone courses in learning how to learn. So, do a course or, get some content on how you can best learn. I mean, the proof is in the pudding only when you go to actually learn something that you need to learn, or you really, really, you can see the evidence of your learning. So I do think there's something around us all needing to show best practice all the time to employees, so that if you are going to provide a learning experience or a journey or a campaign or a course, whatever it is, it needs to have all those key fundamentals in it, right? So that you're giving the signals of this is how you learn. So
Part of environment stuff, isn't it? That when you get back in, if you've been on some sort of course or activity, even if it's stretched over time, that when you're in the workplace, everything else is congruent with what you've just learned. So if you've just learned that reflection after an event is a good idea, but your day is full of meetings, back-to-back meetings, you have no time for reflection, the work environment is not supporting what you've just learned. And I think it's those sort of things. So, it could be simple things like organizations set up, well, we only have 20-minute meetings or 50-minute meetings. And the time after that is, before you go to the next one, you reflect and prepare potentially for the next one. So those are the really practical things, I think, environmentally, that we should be thinking about setting in place that will help people actually do the learning, rather than just, yes, here's a course and you've got, you have to attend it and you've only got this time to attend it. And as soon as you've attended it, we're not going to ask you what you learned or how you're going to apply it. We're just going to get you to do something else.
Yeah. And I guess that comes back full circle to some of the risks we were talking about earlier on, is if you allow people just, not allow, but obviously they can do it now. Like, people can go and look for answers. They can go and Google things. Obviously now you're getting AI answers too. Soon there'll be more chatbots embedded in the kind of tools they're using at work. You can quickly look up an answer. But actually, if you really need to learn something deeper, if L&D is slightly less absent from that picture and there's more self-serve, but we haven't embedded kind of how to help yourself before, then there's a risk that it's very much in one ear, out the other, do the task, move on. And we become kind of functional, almost mirroring kind of the robots we might be working next to, rather than really like using our full capacity and, expanding our brains and really kind of going deep.
And I think that kind of is the scary thing, because, AI will only get better and better. It's got more knowledge than we can ever in our entire lives ever hope to gain. And I know a lot of that is predictive knowledge. It doesn't really know, but it gives the appearance of knowing. Mm-hmm. So maybe, it doesn't matter whether it knows or not. If it gets cleverer than us, then what are we going to do?
We'll do some more podcasts, Stella, and we'll be fine. Okay, well, we'll probably just scare people off, but there is lots of practice in there that we can pull out. I guess it's like we talked a little bit about what makes a good model and how to help learners learn as well, and creating that environment. Do you think it requires there's a mind shift change needed from L&D teams and L&D team leaders to help them think differently about what their role is?
Definitely. Yeah, I think in L&D we really need to stop thinking, and I'm not the first person to say this by any stretch of the imagination. We need to start thinking about our role is to serve the business by doing what they ask us to do, because they're not learning specialists. They don't know. But if we are learning specialists, and I think we should be, I think L&D should become much more specialized, and that doesn't necessarily mean we have to have lots of L&D exams, but I think we should see ourselves as professional and have professional skills that are validated and are valued by the business, which I think comes down to challenging the business. So instead of when somebody comes to you and says, we want a course on X, instead of saying that, if L&D just get much better at saying, well, what's the problem you're trying to solve, then I think that is one of the mindsets we should go away from. So actually we should stop being helpful and start being more challenging. And I think that's all of the big things that L&D are. We tend to be helpful people. We like to help. Yeah. And I think the best way to help would be to stop doing what people ask and actually trying to understand what is it people really need and how can we help them do that. And if we can help them do it for themselves, we can just help them walk towards whatever they need. We may not be needed to do anything apart from put up that challenge and ask the questions.
And to get our dopamine fixes from somewhere else.
Well, I don't know about you, but I love it. If I've helped somebody find something for themselves, that's more exciting than if I've told them something.
Yeah.
And I may not get it, but if I've helped, when you see that light dawn because they've thought of it, I get a dopamine rush from that.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing is to move away from knowing to doing.
Mm-hmm.
So really get, it's content again, but it's focusing on what do we need people to do, not know.
Yeah. And I think that's only going to rise, as we said, with the shift to task. So I think that's a good thing. I'm going to ask you one more question, if that's okay, before we close out. So you've actually already answered my magic wand question, because I normally ask that at the end, but you gave an answer earlier without even being prompted. So there you go, which proves that you actually are magic. But if you could put any L&D practice or technology or approach in the bin and it would stay there forever, what would you love to get rid of?
I think, can I have two?
Yeah, go on then.
One would be the lecture, and that's whether it's, an actual standing in a lecture theatre or whether it's, a digital talking head lecture. So one would be the lecture. Mm-hmm. And then I think the other one would be measuring completion rates, because it just doesn't really add anything at all.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's whack those in the bin, and we can send them off into orbit, and they'll go out there and never be seen again.
Excellent.
Or will they? We'll have to see. But no, it's good to make a wish for things to go away. Okay, brilliant. Well, it's been fantastic to have you as a guest on Learning at Large, and really appreciate the conversation we've had, which has taken a few different avenues, but I think all important ones. And it's coming back to really what makes effective learning and how we can empower people to do the best that they can in that space as well.
Thank you, Kirsty. I really enjoyed talking to you.
Thanks.